I want to welcome you to Transparent. This is episode 1 of a brand new podcast where I will share my journey as a parent of a transgender boy. Now, first of all, when we say transgender boy, what that means is they were not a boy growing up or considered a boy or using male pronouns, and then at some point became a boy. So it is a trans boy. I am a parent of a trans boy. So that would be my trans son or just son in the language we're using. I am a Christian, and I am 10 years into my journey as the parent, the mother of this trans boy. To honor them, because this is not about them, this is just my journey, I will be using my pseudonym of Transparent, and I will not use their name, but rather to say my son. And I will use the pronouns that honor him, which are the male pronouns. So moving forward, I just want to start at the beginning because I am making this podcast having not had a podcast to listen to and walking through this journey for 10 years without other resources. There are resources that are available. I did read a book that was written for churches, advising them on how to deal with LGBTQI plus issues. But I did not join any support groups because this issue of my child transitioning to a different gender was so very personal, so very painful. I was all over the spectrum as a parent, going from embracing to rejecting to judging to celebrating. And it has been an incredible journey. And I did not lose my faith in God through this. And I have learned a lot about what happened when my child was growing up and what I didn't recognize. And so I just want to share my truth in an anonymous way, so that any parent that is going through this, or maybe an aunt or uncle or grandparent, can listen to my voice and know you're not alone. This is hard. It's not easy. It's not crystal clear. You won't be able to please everyone, no matter what you do, no matter what you say. There will be people who judge you, no matter what pronoun you use for that child, that individual, that adult. And so it can't be about pleasing other people. This is a journey as a Christian relative of a transgender person that requires greater intimacy with God, more communication with Him, deeper understanding of His word, His ways, so that we don't get lost in it or chewed up and spit out by the world. And so I'm going to share things from my journey, and I hope that they bless you, and maybe you share it with somebody that you know that's facing some of the similar challenges that I have faced. So welcome to Transparent. In the beginning, I was not super surprised when my child told me that he is a boy. And he already had a name, didn't know the name was coming, but I wasn't super surprised. Along the road, I had seen signs of possible things like this happening. He started to have friends that were transgender, and also had friends that were dressing very gender neutral, and was reading things and following things in art along the lines of manga and anime, and was going to anime conventions. So I, being the protective Christian parent, was concerned mostly with pedophiles being at these anime conventions. And so I went with him and his friends to these anime conventions as a chaperone because I wanted to protect my child. What I needed to be protecting my child from had nothing to do with pedophiles. It was really about identity. what was interesting was it seemed so good to me. Everyone was so nice. Like, oh, you're so and so. Did you make that cosplay? Wow, you did an amazing job. Where did you get this? How did you do that? And super affirming, super fun and loving. And I thought to myself, okay, I was overreacting. I didn't need to be concerned about anime conventions. But what's interesting was that a lot of the youth that, and even adults that enjoyed this venue, these anime conventions, and being in a cosplay, portraying themselves to be somebody else, they were people that weren't typically the kind of jocks or cheerleaders or class president or people that already get a lot of attention and affirmation from people for being themselves. A lot of the people that enjoy going to these, and I say this with all love in my heart, and this isn't any kind of discount, but it's just kids that were maybe on the autistic spectrum, maybe just for whatever reason, a little awkward, a little unusual, and maybe didn't get a lot of that same level of attention in their normal day-to-day life. Just an observation. Yet when they dressed up in this cosplay and portrayed themselves as being someone that they weren't, there was a lot of affirmation. And I just thought, wow, that's really healthy. I love that everybody has this ability. And I dressed up, you know, for fun. I went a couple times because it was fun and everyone was super sweet, super friendly. And I mean it, like extremely loving. And it was only this past year that I realized this was the beginning of my child being super affirmed as someone that they weren't. And I look back at my childhood and even trick-or-treating, I would put on a costume and then I would go in front of strangers, neighbors, people that I saw all the time who never had a minute to talk to me, who never said hello, who never said anything nice. But now I'm dressed up as somebody completely different. I'm picturing myself in this clown outfit. And now I'm knocking on their door. I don't even know them. And they're feeding me sugar, something very sweet. And they're complimenting the costume. And so I went through this same rewarding for being someone different scenario as a child. And it's only now that I look back and I think that's a little messed up. We should have tight neighborhoods and we should be a community where we are affirmed for being uniquely us, no matter what that looks like, no matter how dull on the outside or whatever. We should love each other for who we are and celebrate our uniqueness and not just celebrate the celebrities, those that get celebrated, but really just celebrate the uniqueness of all our, but that's a sidebar. And I'm just talking about my experience. So I hadn't even realized this whole, I think it's a societal rewarding the facade thing that happens. And so when my child wanted to go to these anime things and I started going and saw that it was super fun and kind of joined in, what I didn't realize was that his identity was slowly fading away into neutrality. And for homecoming or prom or something, I even asked, like, do you want to find a dress that is kind of like a tuxedo? Because I was trying to be supportive and keep my relationship healthy with my child. And I was seeing this trend of gender fluidity and gender neutrality. And I, having been a tomboy, which we would now call it, and still, I mean, I do things that are male gender normal things like plumbing and electrical work. And, I like to work with my hands. And so I grew up not really even thinking about my gender until I was in college. And then I had a boyfriend and I was pre-med and I said, well, wait a minute, I'm the one that's going to have a baby. But like until then, my parents raised me to be whatever I wanted to be. And so I was being super supportive. And I said, do you want to find like a black dress that has like a white and then the tie and kind of, and we went to, I think, Goodwill to find a dress or whatever. And he picked out a dress. I said, okay, great, whatever. But short hair, and makeup and pantyhose. But I wasn't trying to force my child to do or be anything, nor should we. But the fact that I was even thinking about the tuxedo dress shows that there were little signs along the way that this was part of his life. What I didn't know was that because we were going to church, there was a fear, a very deep fear, a valid fear based on testimonies of other people, that if we were to find out that he was believing himself to be a boy, considering himself to be a boy, identifying as a boy, we might cut him off, kick him out, kick him to the curb. And by the way, statistics for people who are kicked out of their house and adolescents are less than 48 hours before traffickers collect them. And then they do whatever they want to them. It's not a good picture. So there was good reason for him to be apprehensive about telling his devout Christian parents that he's a boy. But living in that fear, it just opened up more and more doors to what I now see is strategies of the enemy to infect my child with pain, physical pain, emotional pain, mental anguish. And because of those different pains, he started to use drugs and I think stealing and skipping school and just acting out in ways because there was so much going on in his heart and his head. And at this time, I'm seeing some of these things. I'm getting called by the principal. We're like, well, maybe if we switch schools. And I talked to him about it, and he said, I have a problem, but it is not a drug problem. So we resisted putting him in any sort of treatment. And then there was a day that he was not getting up, and then he was late for school, and I was home. And at this point, I've like gone back to college because I already raised my kids mostly. And so anyway, I had to get to school. And I went into his room, and he was inhaling screen duster. And so I and was kind of despondent. And I said, that's it. Because we, at this point, had been going to a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, whatever, all that stuff to help with the issues that I didn't know what the issues were. And here I see my child melting his brain with this chemical. And I said, time out. This is not okay. This can kill you. Why are we doing all this work to heal the brain and you're killing it? Nope. And so what I did next was we had an intervention at the counselor, psychologist, whatever. And with the psychologist blessing and yes, this is what has to happen, we committed our son to a mental hospital. That was the hardest thing. That was the hardest week of my entire life. I didn't know everything that was going on. I just wanted to keep my child safe. What I now know about the way spiritual warfare works, this was not a good place to send my child. I can't go back, but I am telling you that I put my child in a mental hospital temporarily to figure out what we needed to do next to prevent my child from hurting themselves further with chemicals. And he hadn't been going to school. I mean, a lot of wheels were falling off the cart, and we needed to just stop the living the wrong way and figure out what do we need to do to help. Well, in that traumatic situation with lots of people who are in traumatic situations, it was actually exposing him to things in the spirit I wasn't aware of. More on that in future episodes. I hope I'm whetting your appetite to hear more. But it was very difficult, and we had family visits, and we had lessons and all these things. And at the meantime, we were trying to figure out, what do we do next? Where do we go from here? Because in an inpatient, outpatient, all these things, we settled on a wilderness program. And so if any of you have ever heard of a wilderness program, it's where you force the child to go into the wilderness with an organization that specializes in taking children into the wilderness. And they don't have access to their cell phones or television or sometimes plumbing or sometimes silverware or whatever. They strip them down physically. They're no longer wearing their daily clothes and what they identify with, but they're wearing provided clothing, sort of like jail, but camping. And then they have guided emotional, mental healing, and they feed them because some kids are malnourished because they've been eating junk food or whatever. So they feed them well, and then they get them strong and clear their mind and camaraderie. And there's a culture in these things. And then that gives parents also like 2 or 3 months, depending on the program, whatever it is, to find what's the next. So we picked a wilderness program and we sent him there, and it was very hard on him, and but it was also very healthy because it was in nature and because he was surrounded by professionals. Was it perfect? No. Were there other troubled teens there? Yes, that's why they're there. Were bad things also picked up? Yes. But it gave us time to figure out what we needed to do next. Now, this is where the counselors were talking to him and working through some things, and he got the courage up to tell myself and his father that he is a boy. And because, as I mentioned, I had seen a lot of these kind of flags along the way that this could be something that was going on, I was prepared, and we were prepared on how we would answer. And our answers were, I'm going to just summarize the dad's because this isn't his story, it's my story, but it was, I love you no matter what. That's the summary. The classes I was taking in school were sociology and other things, and I had learned in sociology about the statistics that surround not just LGBTQI plus individuals, but specifically transgender individuals. And there is higher suicide rate, and there is higher homelessness rate. There is all these things I don't want for my child. And so my answer was basically, I love you, fill in the blank name he chose, and I am for you. I don't want this for you. And here is why. Because I have read these statistics, and I don't want these things for you. I want the opposite for you. But this is your choice, and I support you. I love you. And I know this was hard for you to tell us. And you are still our child. You are our son. Now, did I feel like this was my son? No. I'm not looking at a boy. I'm looking at a girl. I'm looking at someone that I've known to be my daughter my entire parenting of this child. And I never saw this child as not being enough in any way. And so this was very hard for me to say what I chose to say and assure my son of our love, but at the same time, not know where to go from here, not know how we got here exactly. Now I have more clarity. It's Monday morning quarterback time. I'm 10 years in. I'm looking back. I've had the Lord showing me a lot of things. But at this time, I just didn't know where to go. So that was our coming out of the closet moment. By the way, I am recording this episode and plan to record all episodes in my closet. The reason is because there's clothes hanging everywhere. And so the sound quality is really good. There's not a lot of echo in here. But at the end of every episode, I will be coming out of the closet. So just so you know. And I say that lightheartedly now, but I will tell you that season in my life was just exceedingly difficult. And I had to learn a lot about myself and ways that I was dealing with pain. And it came out in ways of trying to be controlling because I felt very out of control. When he was in the mental hospital, I remember I was at the same time having to get a house ready to sell, or maybe it was something I don't even. But I was getting a toilet at Lowe's, and I really should have asked somebody for help to get the toilet onto the cart and the flatbed cart, and I didn't. I wanted it to be hard. I wanted it to hurt, and I was like, "What am I doing?" And I realized even in that moment when it hurt because of a choice I made, I was in control of my pain. That's how painful it was to be going through this as a mother. That I would actually, people don't understand why people do cutting. Well, this was self-harm, and it was, a toilet. Lifting the toilet, knowing that I could really injure my back and this could really hurt me. And it did hurt. It was hard. It was too heavy. I needed to ask for help. But I had this weird analgesic effect on my heart because this is pain I was in control of. And I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. And if it doesn't, that's okay. That's okay. It didn't to me until I realized what it was. And it makes me sad for myself that I was in that much pain. But I don't know how else to describe the level of pain that I was feeling in my heart, that my child wasn't asleep in their bed. They were in a mental hospital. And so that it was a difficult time. So I was learning some things about myself and about the world in this whole process. So that is the introduction to my journey as a trans parent. And I am choosing now to be transparent with you and everyone that hears this because I want you to know other people have been there. This is just my journey, and yours doesn't have to look anything like mine. But I want to create a space where you realize that if it's not now, there will be a time for you to compose your story, to put together your thoughts, and for things to make more sense, even if they don't make sense now. But I'm going to end this episode with just saying, I bless you in the name of Jesus Christ. And I ask the Father right now, wherever you are listening to this, Father in heaven, would you pour out your Holy Spirit on the listener? Would you surround them and fill them, Lord, with your love? Would you minister to the wounds in their soul that parenting or being an aunt or grandparent or a friend of a transgender individual has caused? And would you heal the wounds in their soul? And would you give them something to replace the fear or the loneliness or the questions around it as we go through this transparent journey together? And now it's time for me to go out of the closet. And I bless you, and I hope this blessed you too.